A judge attempted to publicly humiliate Eleanor Vance by ordering her jailed in front of everyone. But just moments later, Olivia Hayes intervened, and everything took a dramatic turn. What initially appeared to be a public takedown completely reversed. By the end, the judge lost control, and Eleanor walked free. Before we start, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss what they never saw coming. MS. Vance, I've given you 2 warnings already. Judge Thompson Reynolds stated from the bench, his agitation evident. He was known for his quick temper and had little tolerance for prominent individuals who challenged his authority. Yet, Eleanor Vance stood tall on the witness stand, unfazed. "Your Honor, I'm simply stating the truth," she said calmly. "If that's a problem, perhaps this courtroom has a more significant issue than you're willing to acknowledge." A heavy silence filled the room. Judge Reynolds' eyes narrowed. "This is your final warning." Her attorney shifted in his seat. "Your Honor, with all due respect, my client is responding to a question under oath." The judge raised his hand. "She's grandstanding, and I will not permit it." Before we start, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss what they never saw coming. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Quiet murmurs began to ripple through the gallery, only to be abruptly silenced by the sharp rap of the gavel. "I find MS. Vance in contempt of court," Judge Reynolds declared flatly. "Bailiff, take her into custody." Gasps echoed through the room. Even the court reporter looked up in disbelief. Eleanor remained silent, casting a brief glance at her legal team. Her primary lawyer appeared stunned, but Olivia Hayes, seated 2 chairs away, simply closed the folder in front of her. "Bailiff, please approach MS. Vance," the judge instructed. Eleanor stood without resisting as her hands were gently secured behind her back. Phones clicked quietly in the gallery, despite Judge Reynolds' earlier warning against photography. Olivia finally stood, calm and composed. "Your Honor," she began, "we object to this ruling. My colleague and I have already filed an emergency stay regarding any action taken against MS. Vance in this hearing." Judge Reynolds glanced down, acknowledging the document. "But no stay has been entered into the record." Olivia held up a printed document. "It has now." She approached the clerk and handed it over. The courtroom fell silent again as Judge Reynolds scanned the first page, then the second. His jaw tightened. "This was filed this morning?" he asked. "Yes," Olivia replied, "and signed by Judge Davies at 10:43 a.m. The clock on the courtroom wall read 10:57 a.m. Judge Reynolds leaned back in his chair. "We will recess for 10 minutes." Eleanor remained standing, cuffed, her eyes fixed on the judge. She hadn't uttered a word since the ruling. She didn't need to. Olivia turned slightly toward her. "Before we start, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss what they never saw coming." "You're not going anywhere," she whispered. Judge Reynolds stood and exited through the door behind the bench. The room buzzed again, though more quietly this time. Nobody wanted to miss what came next. Olivia Hayes remained standing as the judge left. Eleanor was still in handcuffs. Her lawyer leaned toward the bailiff. "She's under a federal stay now. Are the restraints necessary?" The bailiff hesitated. "Until the judge says otherwise, I have to follow current orders." Olivia kept her eyes on the document the clerk was reviewing. She didn't speak again until the clerk returned to the bench area and disappeared into chambers. Eleanor turned slightly toward Olivia. "You filed it this morning, before the hearing?" Olivia nodded. "We anticipated this possibility." Eleanor gave a slight nod. "I didn't think he'd go that far." Olivia looked at her directly. "He was waiting for the chance." Eleanor's attorney leaned in. "That stay what's the language?" Olivia replied, "No ambiguity. It blocks enforcement until federal review." The assistant district attorney approached them. "You bypassed our office entirely?" Olivia didn't look at him. "Emergency procedure. No requirement for notice. You should have at least given a heads up." "It wasn't a courtesy motion," Olivia said. "It was necessary." He walked away without replying. Several minutes passed. The door behind the bench reopened, and Judge Reynolds returned, holding the document Olivia had submitted. He took his seat without acknowledging anyone directly. "This court has reviewed the emergency order issued by Judge Davies of the U.S. District Court," he began. "The order places a temporary stay on any action related to contempt findings in this matter." Eleanor remained silent, her expression unchanged. "Given that instruction, MS. Vance will not be remanded into custody at this time. The order is binding, and the court will comply." Olivia didn't move. Eleanor's lawyer exhaled softly. The judge turned to the bailiff. Remove the restraints. The bailiff stepped over and unfastened the cuffs. Eleanor stretched her wrists slightly, but said nothing. We will recess for 15 minutes and resume the hearing at that time, Judge Reynolds said. He stood and left the courtroom again. Eleanor sat next to her counsel. Olivia remained standing, organizing her documents. Eleanor looked at her. Thanks, she said softly. Olivia responded without turning. It's not over yet. Her tone was flat, professional. She wasn't celebrating. Eleanor's attorney leaned over. What do you think his next move is? Olivia closed her folder. He'll try to pivot, discredit the filing, shift focus, or delay. He's not the type to back down. Eleanor said no. Olivia agreed. But now he knows someone's watching him from above. Eleanor leaned back, still calm. I'm ready. Olivia finally sat. Good, because I think he's about to test how ready. When the court resumed, Judge Reynolds returned with a prepared expression measured, unreadable. He adjusted his glasses and looked over the courtroom. We will now proceed with the evidentiary portion of today's hearing, he said. The court will note the federal stay and proceed within its remaining jurisdiction. Olivia didn't respond. Eleanor's attorney simply nodded. The prosecution called its next witness, Marcus Bell, a regulatory analyst expected to comment on one of Eleanor's public statements that had been labeled misleading by the opposing side. Bell took the stand and was sworn in. The assistant district attorney began his questioning. Mr. Bell, did you review the remarks made by Ms. Vance during her February interview on national television? Yes, I did. Were any of those remarks factually inconsistent with official regulatory reports? Yes. One of them regarding projected job loss figures was exaggerated by a large margin. Olivia leaned in slightly, taking a few notes, but not interrupting. The judge watched her carefully, as if waiting for her to make a move. Eleanor's attorney rose for cross-examination. Mr. Bell, are you aware of how the numbers Ms. Vance cited were calculated? I wasn't provided her sources, so it's possible she was referencing alternative projections. Bell paused. It's possible, but they wouldn't align with official data. Olivia whispered to Eleanor. He's soft. Let your lawyer chip away. Eleanor nodded once. The hearing continued for another half hour. The judge maintained a controlled tone, but it was clear he was focusing heavily on each moment where Eleanor's team might slip. He interrupted objections quickly and gave more leeway to the prosecution. Olivia noticed it all, but said nothing. During a short break and witness transition, Eleanor leaned toward her team. He's trying to build a new angle. Not contempt, but credibility. Olivia agreed. That's his pivot. If he can't lock you up, he'll try to discredit your voice. Eleanor folded her arms. I've dealt with worse. Olivia looked at her directly. Not with the federal stay hanging over his head. Months passed, and the fallout from Judge Reynolds' resignation gradually became a closed chapter. The case faded from public attention, but its impact resonated deeply within the legal community. Olivia Hayes had done more than just defend her client. She had set a precedent, one that signaled that even the most powerful judges were not above scrutiny, especially when they overstepped the bounds of their authority. Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, continued to focus on her policy work. She had made it clear from the beginning that she didn't want this case to become a tool for her political gain. In her eyes, this was never about taking down a judge or making a spectacle of the situation. It was about ensuring that the rule of law was respected and that the power of the courtroom was not abused. Her team held one final meeting about the matter after the news of Reynolds' resignation. The communications advisor raised the question of whether they should comment publicly. Eleanor gave a simple but firm response. We're done with it. Let the work speak for itself. Olivia, too, moved on. The case was over, but her approach to it had shifted her own perception of her career. While she had always been a skilled and respected lawyer, this case had brought her into the spotlight not as a fierce advocate, but as someone who understood the nuances of law and perception. She had known exactly when to push, when to hold back, and when to let the system reveal its own flaws. In the end, it wasn't her forceful argumentation that had won the day. It was her ability to stand firm and let the law take its course. At a legal conference several months later, Olivia was approached by a young attorney who had been following her work closely. I just want to say, the attorney began hesitantly, you really set a standard for us for what it means to practice law with integrity, to stand firm on principle. I've seen lawyers who think it's about winning, but you showed us it's about doing the right thing, even when it's tough. Olivia smiled, taking the compliment in stride. It's not about winning every case. It's about making sure the system works, that people trust it. That's the real win. Meanwhile, across the country, legal blogs continued to dissect the case. Though most had moved on to new controversies and bigger scandals, some noted how the events surrounding Reynolds' resignation had subtly reshaped the way judges were viewed in the legal profession. It was no longer enough for judges to rule with authority. They were expected to rule with fairness, transparency, and respect for the limits of their power. And those who didn't were reminded that the law had a way of keeping them in check. For Reynolds, his early retirement was a bitter end to what had once been a distinguished career. Though he had once held great influence, his downfall had been swift, and his name had become synonymous with overreach. In his private moments, he must have wondered if he had miscalculated his actions. But by the time he realized the depth of his mistake, it was too late. Olivia, on the other hand, knew that in her profession, success wasn't always about being in the spotlight. It was about knowing when to stay quiet, when to push back, and when to let the truth speak for itself. She had always prided herself on her ability to assess a situation quickly, to read between the lines, and to let the facts guide her. This case was no different. For Eleanor, the aftermath of the case was bittersweet. While she had achieved her goal of holding the line, the experience had left a mark on her. The world of politics and law was a treacherous one, and even as she moved forward, she knew that the way ahead would require the same level of vigilance and precision that had been necessary to navigate this particular challenge. She also knew, however, that she had done the right thing. The case had shown her that sometimes standing up for what's right meant facing down powerful figures, and that was something she could be proud of. She didn't need to bask in the glory of victory or claim credit for the end result. The law had done its job, and that was enough. In the end, the events surrounding Judge Reynolds' resignation were a reminder of the delicate balance of power within the courtroom. While judges were granted significant authority, they were not infallible, and when their actions crossed the line, there were consequences. The case also highlighted the critical role that lawyers played, not just as advocates for their clients, but as stewards of the legal system itself. Lawyers like Olivia Hayes understood that the law wasn't just a tool to win cases. It was the foundation upon which society rested, and it needed to be treated with the respect it deserved. As Olivia and Eleanor continued with their respective careers, the legacy of this case lived on. It had reminded everyone involved that the law was not a game. It was a system that had to be respected, upheld, and defended. And while the headlines had moved on, those who had been part of the case knew that they had made a difference in the course of justice. In the quiet corridors of the courthouse, as cases continued to be argued and decided, one thing was clear. The scales of justice have been balanced. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel for more content.